Hi, my name is Ruben and this is my finance project for this semester. The point of this project is to choose 2 industries and 5 firms in each industry and analyze them and then decide which firm is the best in which industry and overall. So the 2 industries that I decided to work on are commercial airlines and household products. The 5 firms in commercial airlines are American Airlines, Delta Airlines, United Airlines, Southwest Airlines, and JetBlue Airlines. On the other hand, the 5 household products firms are Procter & Gamble, Clorox, Kimberly-Clark, L'Oreal, and Revlon. Now the ratios that I'm going to use to analyze these firms are related to profitability, liquidity, solvency, and leverage, and we'll get into more detail later on. Let's first talk about what the most important thing about a firm is and what determines that it is the best firm. Usually it is assumed that the management's most important goal is to maximize shareholder value, and that is measured with the ratio return on equity. So that implies that the most important ratio of all is the return on equity ratios. Based on the return on equity assumption, in the airlines industry, we can clearly see that JetBlue Airlines is consistently higher among its competitors for the previous 5 years in terms of return on equity. So it's easy to assume that JetBlue Airlines is the best airline industry right now. But return on equity is not the only thing that matters. Return on equity is made up of 2 components, leverage and operational efficiency. If we have more leverage, then that means we're taking in more risks and more loans. That is unpreferable, and therefore operational efficiency is highly regarded as the most important factor in determining firm efficiency. Now, if we take into consideration the operational efficiency, or as in this case it's called operating margin, we can see that JetBlue Airlines has the highest average operating margin for the last 5 years. So I can conclude that JetBlue Airlines is the best airline industry for commercial airlines right now in the market. Similarly, the return on equity for household products for the last 5 years is like this, and we can see that Kimberly-Clark is consistently higher than its competitors in the market. But, as we discussed earlier, that's not the only thing that matters. Operational efficiency is one of the most important factors as well, and in which case we can see that Procter & Gamble has the highest operating margin among these 5 firms. So from these 2 industries we decided to analyze Procter & Gamble and JetBlue Airlines. Now let's discuss the profitability ratios of these 2 firms. In this bar diagram we can see and compare the return on assets and return on equity ratios for these 2 firms, and it's pretty clear that Procter & Gamble is far ahead of JetBlue Airlines in this analysis because they have a far greater return on assets and return on equity. Moving on to liquidity, we can see that the current ratio for JetBlue Airlines is slightly higher than Procter & Gamble, so JetBlue Airlines wins this round. Furthermore, let's move on to solvency. The 2 ratios for solvency discussed in this project are interest coverage and debt to asset ratio. Interest coverage is basically how many times the firm can afford to pay the interest based on its net income. For that particular ratio, we can see that Procter & Gamble has a far higher interest coverage ratio than JetBlue Airlines, but on the other hand, JetBlue Airlines has a higher debt to asset ratio compared to Procter & Gamble, which means that for every dollar in assets, JetBlue Airlines has a far greater debt. So it's in more risk than Procter & Gamble. So clearly Procter & Gamble wins this round as well. Now moving on to leverage and our final ratio analysis, we can see that JetBlue Airlines has a high equity multiplier than Procter & Gamble, which is a bad thing because the higher the equity multiplier, the higher the firm depends upon outside sources to fund its assets. So we can see that Procter & Gamble, because they have a lower equity multiplier ratio, Procter & Gamble is far less risky for shareholders. So, in conclusion, we can say that Procter & Gamble is the better firm in these two industries and overall. And that concludes my project. Thank you.